when I see people doing like, let's say Space Wolves, you've got like the pack markings on the shoulder.
Yeah.
When they highlight the pack marking, I'm like, what? Where's the edge?
Hello everyone, welcome back to All Around the World Eaters. I am joined today by the wonderful Chris Peach, better known to many people as Peachy from the painting phase and lots of other famous renown. How are you doing, man?
I'm great, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
Hello.
Renown. I'm not
Yes.
sure about that. But thank
It's
you.
really cool to have you here, man.
Pleasure.
So obviously, most recently you're part of this wonderful show called The Painting Phase, and lots of other, really interesting stories. I suppose most people know you from growing up from GW tutorials and learning how to paint and stuff, myself included. Trying to work out how to get the crisp white World Eater paint scheme, and I think it was actually one of your videos was on the YouTube channel at the time for the white armor, and that befuddled me for some
Yes.
time.
Yes, I honestly nowadays looking back, I can't remember what I did. There's a few key models I remember I did, but a lot of people say, "Oh, you did that painting video," and I'm like, "Did I?"
Yeah,
don't remember.
sure.
That was so long ago. Because
Yeah.
we used to do these tip of the day things, and there was like 5 a week we'd film. So yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot.
adds up after a while. Yeah,
Yeah,
one spaceman
absolutely.
starts to look a lot like another after a while.
Yeah, yeah.
But for anyone who doesn't know you, which is probably, I imagine, not that many people listening to the show, but just in case, why might we have you on today? Like, what do you do? Why are you a worthy guest of the channel? So to speak?
Worthy. Well, that's kind. I don't think I'm worthy. I mean, I've been around the business for wargaming for about I'll be coming up to over 22 years now. If we're talking since starting in wargaming employment, so I've got a few years of that kind of stuff behind me. I've been an army painter for most of that, so painting stuff fast, and that's I think one of the big things that's always been a draw for me is like painting armies and regiments and stuff. And having to do that as a job was great, working for a workshop and then taking a load of those skill sets. And now on my own channel with Pat and Jeff, the painting phase, I get to showcase a lot of the skills. Not all the time, we do a bit of everything, but yeah, worthy guess. I'd disagree with that. I just lucky.
Come on now. But yeah, so obviously, like the painting phase is like this incredible show, and for anyone listening who hasn't already kind of like tuned into it, like you've had some amazing guests on, especially in the last like year or so. You know, there's some really incredible people. Your episode with Stephen Box in particular, I really enjoyed that one. That was really good. But yeah, so for anyone maybe not interested or not interested, but not heard of you yet, definitely call over there and check them out. But to launch into this episode of the podcast, I always like to ask my guests like a thing not at all about wargaming. There's two questions throughout the show, one in part one in part two. But Chris, where is your favorite place in the world that you've ever visited to kick things off?
Oh, that is a tough one. I think there's a lot that have like fond memories, and it's a really weird one. And I think I would go with Chicago. And the only reason I'm saying Chicago is because loads of just like really nice things happened in a short space of time. So it was just before my wife and myself got married, and I was working Games Day Chicago. I was with Jez and a whole bunch of other lovely folks, and it was my wife's first trip away. So it was the first time she's ever been on a plane, first time she's ever been to a foreign country. So this was like what 13 years ago now. So it was just we loved the States because I'd been a couple of times beforehand, but yeah, it was really nice just for her to just experience that. And then just lots of like nice things happened whilst we were there, and like there was a weird situation. I say weird, it wasn't weird, it was just nice because we finished the convention and we were on our way back from doing some shopping in Chicago. And on the train, as you do, I mean, it's just some people don't like it. They think it's a bit sort of I don't know, creepy or cringy, but I always like to give up my seat for ladies or older folks or pregnant folks. I always have. It's just like something that my mum's taught me, and it's respectful. And there was like a couple of folks standing. I always feel a bit awkward when I'm sat down and they're standing, so I was like, "Do you want my seat?" And then it kind of turned into this sort of like conversation with this lady and a partner, asking where we were from and stuff, and we mentioned where we were from and trying to explain Derby. So I said Nottingham, Robin Hood, it's easier.
Yeah, right.
And then they all just, and we mentioned we're getting married. They're like, "Oh, can we pray for you?" And I was just like, sure. I was thinking they'd go
Sure, I
home and do
guess.
it for us. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, if that, I mean, I'm not massively religious, but yeah, by all means, if that's really kind of you. I feel honored that you'd want to do that. And then everyone on the train just got on their knees and started praying. And
Wait,
it was
what? No way.
yeah. And
What?
what I didn't realize was they were going to a religious convention in the same place we'd been to. So they
Okay.
all got down and they all started praying. And me and Liz were like, this is
What?
bad.
Dude, that
So
is an experience.
that was, and there's lots of other things. Well, we got to see
Yeah.
Air Force One on the flight out and stuff.
Oh, that's
But
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
a bit of payback. We got to the train station and they didn't know where the convention center was. I was like, "Oh, what's it called?" And for life, I can't remember now. And I was like, "Oh, that's where we had ours. I'll take you there." So we, as a thank you, we guided
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
to the place they needed to be. So, but yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, that is probably an experience not many people are going to
No.
share in their lifetime.
I don't know where to look. So, if like someone sings happy birthday to me in like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
pub, or even like when I had in the office in at workshop, people
yeah.
like do it, I'll be like, so I find it really awkward. I'm like, oh, what do
Yeah,
I
center of
do?
attention, right? Yeah.
Hide.
Yeah, wow, that's I always get like really interesting answers when I ask this question. And every time I record it, I always say like these answers just get stranger and stranger, and I think you have added to the pile there in that sense.
But yeah,
Um,
Chicago. It's great. I
yeah,
like Chicago.
Chicago. Yeah, well, hard cut off, underline Chicago. Amazing. So you've obviously had a pretty incredible hobby journey, one that I think obviously the vast majority of people have not had in kind of the broader wargaming sphere of things, not just Warhammer and all those
Yeah,
things related.
yeah.
What kind of got you into like tabletop or just like painting art in general? Like, have you always been creative, or was it the usual thing? You walk into a shop, you see the miniatures, your eyes go like, whoa, that kind of a thing.
I think there's a few factors to it. I've always liked drawing, and I think being an army brat, because my dad was in the services during the 80s, so I'd be surrounded by soldiers and tanks and stuff. So that had a big sort of impact on my early life because I'd just like to collect toy soldiers and play games with them. Then I saw my dad doing painting, so I wanted to get involved in that. My older brother Mark, he used to do it lots, and then he was doing like Dungeons and Dragons, and we got Hero Quest, and that kind of got me into that side of it.
Oh, Hero Quest, man.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so cool.
I'm currently getting my son into the current version of Hero Quest.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
actually playing with the figures now and making up his own scenarios, which is great.
Nice.
But it was a factor of that, my love for like war movies and military. Because when most people go to a library and they'll find like books that are like cool, like comic books and stuff like that. I used to go to the military section and just look for like books about battles and stuff, and then I'd get me art book and like random bits of wallpaper that was like blank, so I'd use the opposite side of wallpaper to draw on, so I'd always have like paper. And I used to do lots of drawing, so there was an art background. I liked doing art at school, and I kind of got into illustration, did that at college and uni, with the intention of being an illustrator for workshop. And then after I left uni, I started working at workshop in the retail, and then it kind of just played out from there. And everything I've ever done is just been from being in the right place at the right time and look. And it's a privilege to have been there and done that. Some of it is skill. Some people, maybe I'm doing myself a disservice. There was some skill involved, because I put a lot of time and effort into painting armies and like coming up with ideas and stuff. But I just feel that a lot of it was I was just in the right place at the right time, surrounded by the right people, and that's just how I came to be. And when people say to me, "How do you get a job?" I'm just like, just keep plugging out. I wanted to get into Games Workshop, and I kept failing at the recruitment process. And it wasn't until one lucky day I just wandered by and saw the guy, started talking, and I guess I'd matured a bit, and I was a bit more like communicative, and chilled and just normal and relaxed. But I'm not a normal person. I tend to be quite insular when I go to like picking up my kid from school. You do these tests at work, and they to see what kind of like Myers-Briggs sort of profile you are, and I was worked out that I was an extrovert, but they explained the difference between an extrovert and an introvert, and I think I'd flip between the two. I don't think at some point I probably was an extrovert, but nowadays I'm a bit more introverted.
Yeah,
So I think I was just more extrovert at the time, and then I was forced to be into that position because that was my job. So yeah, it's I think luck and loving war and soldiers and painting and drawing really helped.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah. So like obviously, yeah, you kind of spend quite a bit of time as like an army painter and stuff. And like, did you find that like intensive? I know a lot of people really struggle to kind of get armies over the line in sense of
Mm,
like actually getting a painted collection together. So if that's like something that was like your drive, but also then obviously became your job and stuff like that, that
yeah.
must have been quite intense, right?
It's an I think I'd struggle if I was to reapply for the job now. I'd struggle.
Hmm.
I have reduced my capacity for like how much I would do in a sitting, and I think some of that is down to just not having much free time, having lots of stuff going off around outside work. My work currently takes up even my evenings, just like writing scripts or like responding on social media. So at the time, I loved painting armies. It was what drove me in like my collecting side of things. It was like I want to paint a unit of 20 figures. I want to do them like this. I want to do a regiment of British Redcoats. I want to do a regiment of Empire State Troops and a squad, a platoon, not a squad, a platoon of Imperial Guardsmen. And not we're not talking like minimum requirements platoon. We're talking like the max requirements
Yeah,
for a platoon at the time.
yeah.
So we're like 55 figures.
And the
Um,
mobile infantry as well to
and
go
then,
along
yeah,
with it.
and I think that drive and that excitement, enthusiasm, and mixed with it, certainly in the early days, the hobby team, army painting team was, they wanted people to almost drive their own narrative of a unit and come up with their own ideas and make suggestions. It'll be like
That's
we
pretty
want some
cool, actually. Yeah.
Chaos Warriors painted. Go and make that happen. They need to be Khorne. And you go, oh, what can I do on these that make them feel a bit different than the ones that Heavy Metal are doing for the box cover and stuff like that. So being allowed to have a bit of free reign from a creative point of view was great. Having chances to do an entire army of your own. I mean, that I've probably used the analogy a few times, but I've done loads of armies, but I always use the Empire one because that's just a really good suite of stuff that we did.
Hmm.
Like at the time, there was Duncan, myself, Steve Bowerman, who is in Specialist Games Studio now sculpting. So he's moved from an army painter to a sculptor. So it just goes to show the tree of like
Yeah,
progression
right.
you can do.
You're not locked in. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't remember what he was doing, but I think Duncan was doing Tau or Eldar at the time as an army, and I was doing Empire. And it was the 8th edition book was coming out. And it was like, we want you've got 9 weeks. We want you to paint an army. We want you to do some scenery for the backdrop for photography. And we need a load of stage by stages doing for White Dwarf.
Okay.
So
Cool.
I literally just painted one of every state troop and city for White Dwarf, which was stage by stage using the new Citadel paints that had come out at the time. And then I just did an army of Altdorf because that was the weirdest thing. We used to see Talabheim all the time as the box cover stuff for Empire. And it's like, but Karl Franz is from Altdorf and Reichland. And the argument can be made, which is fair, that the Empire's drawn from many city states, but it was always just like the red and white ones were always used for the box covers. Like there wasn't, and I guess like
it's
Space
all you
Marines.
ever really see, right?
Yeah. And I get it. It's like you get one unit and it makes sense to make everything on the box the same color scheme because it keeps it uniformed. But it was always weird that it was never like Altdorf. It was always Talabheim. So I just did an Altdorf army, got the heraldry book, took some units from there, made up my own, and just had a whale of a time. And I think the passion certainly shone through. And then the scenery was like a Reichsguard chapter house. So
Sick,
they're scattered all across the empire. So I made
Yeah.
stables, I made like cool banners coming from a Witch Fate tour and stuff. And having 9 weeks to do that, and I think 5 or 6 of that was the army, and then 3 of it was the stage by stage and the scenery. So and I had to plan my own time and work that out, and I thrived on that kind of stuff. So when I got
Yeah.
projects like that, it was just so much fun.
I feel like when you have that like sort of room to express yourself within a constraint that you don't have to worry about expressing yourself too much either,
Yeah.
it's like you have like the template, you just kind of have to play around with it as well. Like that's kind of what
Yeah.
you want, that's
Yeah.
really interesting.
No, absolutely. And I think that, saying like from like, how do you maintain that sort of discipline and stuff like that? I think a lot of it was corner cutting. Did a lot of corner cutting with painting because it's the impact in photography. I was painting for photography.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
a lot of the things I did, I still painted the backs, don't get me wrong. I've definitely painted the backs.
Sure. And the underneath part as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But there were certain things that I've just not bothered doing anything with, and that might be belts, buckles, boots.
Yeah.
You just why highlight them when you're never going to see them?
That's
So
it,
there's lots of corner cuts, which I then took into many of my personal projects projects. And I suppose the key thing, which I'm probably going on for ages now, but the key
Oh
thing,
no, it's good. This is great.
cool, is if I was doing Empire in my day to day, or Stormcast, or Dwarfs or Lizardmen, I'd probably do 40k at home, or Napoleonics, or my James Bond game, or something else.
Yeah,
So there was
switch it
always
up.
something to keep me at home engaged. That's what I do now. I've got so many projects in front of me. I mean, we just played a game of Necromunda today, part two, finally coming.
Sick.
And I'm now just that one game. I'm now ready to do more Necromunda stuff. I've got all ideas of like other units to paint for the next games, and random celebrities or random folks to have in
Yeah,
certain
riding
games.
the hype basically, right? Like you
I,
come down from something like that and maintain
yeah,
the kind of hype
yes,
train
yeah,
on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I want to convert some Spirers as well, but I find gaming for me is quite a key part. I don't paint for gaming, if that makes sense. I paint for the pleasure of painting and having
I
a
get
nice
you.
spectacle.
Yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah.
find playing with it then drives the next paint jobs for that army, or that game system.
Yeah.
So even though I'm using Van Sars in the game, and I've got really excited about the game I played today, I'm probably not going to paint that much more extra Van Sar stuff, but I'm definitely going to paint like some extra like hired guns and bounty hunters, or
Oh, the bounty hunter
what.
range is so good.
Oh,
It's
I,
I
I
have
mean,
tons of them scattered amongst my cultists, which like people are like, why are you paying like 30 or 40 euro for like a cultist sergeant in your world leaders? I'm like, it's not about that, it's about the
yeah,
character
yeah,
that's coming
yeah,
through in those models.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, it's so good. So yeah, I get a lot of um drive from just getting one game under my
Yeah.
belt, and then just working from there. So
So it's kind of like the gaming sort of accelerates a story, I guess, in your mind that then sort of
yeah,
inspires how you want to paint on the.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
see that. I totally see that. It's almost like the reverse, I guess, of like what most people go through, where you said like you don't paint it like for gaming, but an awful lot
yeah,
of people do, right? It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
I gotta paint like these many guys because I got a tournament coming up, blah blah blah. But like I always like really like talking to people when they're like, yeah, I like play this game and I got so inspired to paint this thing afterwards. I'm like, tell me more about like exactly
yeah.
why that is.
I mean, there's so many times where I've played a game I've lost, and I'll go, "Oh, that was fun. What could I do to make it better and then win next time? I'll get a
Hmm.
steam tank or something like that." And
Yeah,
then, yeah, I think it certainly helps drive the enthusiasm for the next paint jobs or whatever. It might,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, different for everyone, I guess. But
Yeah, totally, totally. Sweet. So I suppose going on from like, what got you to the hobby, like what is like the kind of this is like a quite a broad question, but like
mm,
what is the hobby to you now, in the sense of like what does it mean to you, because obviously you've massively broadened your horizons from
mm.
from where it was, and it's like every time I was saying to you before we started, like every time I go on your feed there's like some crazy interesting game there that I'm like, okay, cool, that looks amazing. But like what does it, I guess, mean to you now in a sense of where you are with it?
I guess, I mean, from a personal point of view, it's a bit of escapism. It's somewhere where I can just relax and chill and paint. And that's always been the case. And I know a lot of people that have, that struggle with day to day or certain things. They find painting really relaxing. I find that obviously I don't have some of the struggles that some people have, but I definitely find painting a super relaxing thing. I think the hobby is definitely a outlet for the creativity, because I think some of it is I still wish I could be the artist I wanted to be. And I know I'm at a point of my age, and this is not like quitter talk, this is just realism, that I need to invest a lot of time to get back to that point. Um, and I don't think I've got the energy or the enthusiasm or the motivation to do that. I might do in like 10, 15 years when, maybe I've retired or whatever. I wish 10, 15 years now, probably like 30.
Yeah, let's be
But
real here.
yeah, but I mean, that's the personal side of it. The other thing
Hmm.
that I really get from the hobby is just seeing like the impact of what the hobby does to just people in general in the community. So like, I never really thought about it until like probably like the last year or so, when people talk about what they've followed my paint guides and this, that, and the other, and it's really sort of humbling to know that people like have watched my videos and then got a lot from it, and then gone off to do great things themselves, or just got inspired by like a random color scheme I made, or this, that, and the other. And I guess the other thing, that was something I used to love doing in the retail stores, was teaching people how to paint and seeing their love grow and their
Yeah, it's quite a
excitement.
one-on-one experience in that situation, as opposed to like, where you are now, where you're literally inspiring like thousands of people across the
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
It's
And
quite an
I
upscaling.
It is, yeah, and the biggest wins I've had since leaving workshop, and it's hard to see with workshop because it was, I won't say we were restricted, but I didn't really look at the outside world that much. I just did the
Yeah.
odd post for myself and just carried on with life because I was just working and being quite insular. And I wish I hadn't. I wish I was a bit more social then.
Hmm.
And since leaving, I've become a bit, certainly a bit more social, just because I need to. I need to,
Yeah. Bit
promote
more
myself.
prolific.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wish I've got loads of things I need to take photos of to upload onto Instagram, but what I've really enjoyed seeing is with the painting phase, we've done like these paint guides for, like, let's say Kill Team, how to paint this Kill Team box set in like several hours, how to paint this guard army in 12 hours or whatever. And I start off with like the tabletop level, and then I show like some examples of, like, if you want to take it to the next step, you can do these, that. When people post their work and it looks identical, if not better than mine, that's like, yes,
That's so cool.
that's
Right?
what I want.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
people to. I don't want to like show off how good I am. I want to show off how realistic this paint job can be in the time that you're given. And I want you to be able to get to the same bit that I've got to. It's a bit like, the old paint by numbers kind of thing, or like the,
Totally. Yeah.
here's how to draw an owl, but actually do it properly where it's not like two circles and finished. It's kind of like, yeah, if you follow these steps, you will get this piece of art at the end. And that's what I've always wanted from my paint guys, that if you follow the steps I show, you'll get the same end result. And seeing people post that is so sort of rewarding, as a creator.
Yeah. I guess it's like trying to, because I have a very similar thing when I do a paint guide, and some people, I mean, you definitely get it as well, where it's like they just say like, oh, I can never do that, and
yeah,
in my mind I'm like, there's like definitely a percentage of people who paint miniatures that I'm like, okay, cool, that is like aspirational to try and think you're
yeah,
gonna get to
yeah,
that level, like Richard Gray and all them,
yeah, the Richard Greys of the world.
well, I'm like, if I'm here making a tutorial for you, it's because I think that everyone can get to this level.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
doing it because I'm like, oh, you said it really well, to show off my own stuff. It's
yeah,
like, and then getting the reward of someone kind of coming back to you and saying like, hey, I did do that thing and it worked, and here's the result. Like, that is like incredible, because it's like you kind of shared a journey with someone in that sense.
yeah.
Like, I kind of always see it that way.
Yeah, I mean, a great example actually is, there's so many videos out there. I'm not saying these people are wrong, because they have their own methodology and how they do it, but from trying to get people to get an effect with minimal effort and maximum effect, painting white armor. White has always been hard to paint, right? And for me,
You're
it's always
talking
been
to the right people here. Keep going.
it's always been the most simplest way of painting in my head, is to just use the white undercoat and then block colors in and then tidy back up with white. When I see so many people like struggle, that are like getting into the hobby, and they're like trying to like start off with dark gray and build up layers of like lighter grays almost to white edge highlights, I'm like, why are you doing that? It's so much effort. All you need to, I mean, like the Clone Trooper is like the perfect example. I've done like a few since then for myself, but I spray in white. I block out the black bits. If I want markings on him, like the 501st, I'll block them in the base coat stage. And then once all those like colors are blocked in, like the gun, the undersuit, the black bits, any like blue markings, I then get white and tidy up. And then I shade it with that amazing new, what I call my magic sauce for white, which is Soul Blight Grey. You literally just thin that down, paint that all over. That goes in the cracks. You don't even need to highlight it. And it looks like cool white armor. And I've literally just done like a spray job. I've blacked out a couple of bits. I've then tied it back up with white, and that's it. And then and light does a lot of the effect for you. If you're doing it for Golden Demon or whatever, then absolutely you want to get some like shades and recesses and blends in there. But for like on the tabletop, I'm so like happy with my clone army, because
it looks incredible. Yeah,
it looks
like I've
fine.
seen your clone commandos as well.
Yes, yes,
those
7
two
boss
guys that you put.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah, I
like,
need to do the other
they're
two.
outstanding. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
really good.
I wish
it doesn't need to be complicated. I think that's a
No.
lot of people think that it has to be. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, I need to go through like 40 different layers to get to the level that I need to be happy with this. I'm like,
Yeah.
you can literally just like splash some stuff on. Like when I'm teaching people how to do oil painting, they're like, it can't be that simple. I'm like, no, it is. You literally just lash it on, take it off, it looks good. They're like, no, it needs to be more than that. I'm like, no, nope, it does not.
Yeah, I think I learned that quite early on in the studio, and I think that was the blessing I had, is seeing all these talented people that have been, and they've been taught by someone who's then been taught by someone. They're passing all this knowledge down. Was heavy metal. It was classic. They were doing like boogies, quite early on, and it was like they brought this into like the later stuff that they did. And Neil Green Nibs, his name is, he sprayed all the wheels black and then left them. And everyone's like, "Oh, you're not going to highlight?" I was like, "Why? It's rubber. That's what
Yeah,
rubber looks like.
yeah,
Why am I highlighting? I'm not highlighting. I'm going to put some weathering on. I'm going to get some like Steel Legion drab and run it into the recesses, but I'm not highlighting them because it's rubber.
yeah. Rubber,
And they
it's
look like rubber
people are like
tires.
fixated on that like highlighting thing as well,
Yeah,
where they're like,
yeah.
I need to put a highlight on everything. I'm like, no, you don't. Some things
No,
just don't
yeah.
catch light that way. Like it's
Oh,
okay.
a biggest bugbear of mine, and I still see it now, and it's fine. Each to their own and all that. But when I see people doing like, let's say Space Wolves, you've got like the pack markings on the shoulder.
Yeah.
When they highlight the pack mark, and I'm like, what? Where's the
How?
edge? It's a
How?
flat decal. And I
It's
used to
so
do this
good.
with the army painting team when they used to like we did a Space Wolves army, and I looked and we did a review at the end, and I was like, you're gonna have to do all your shoulder pads again. And they're like, why? Because you've highlighted something that doesn't have an edge.
Yeah.
It's a flat decal. I mean, they literally get like paint and like put like black teeth mark on it or red teeth marks or whatever, or jags or dags or what you want to call them. It's not got an edge. It's not got a raised surface. It's not embossed. It's flat. So it will have no edges. So you have to repaint them. And they're like, oh.
Devastating.
Yeah. And I'm like, hey, look, I mean, your highlight looks great, but it doesn't work because
Technically, it's very
yeah,
impressive.
yeah.
However, realistically,
But the weirdest
But
thing
yeah.
is, as soon as they did that, it then made all the highlights on the armor stand out more
Exactly, yeah.
because all
like
that effort.
it's not every panel or every
Yeah,
segment is
yeah.
like framed in this like brighter color. It doesn't need to be a lot of the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. So yeah, sometimes simple is best.
Absolutely, yeah. I definitely think it's like it's kind of harkens back to what you were saying earlier, where it's like, you're painting for photography, all these large scale armies and stuff. You don't need to have every single detail pulled out in like the best possible way. Like people get really fixated when they're like, I can't finish this army because they put like 4 or 5 hours into a single miniature a lot of the time. I'm like,
Yeah,
you don't necessarily need to do that. You can kind of just like pare back and say like, right, let's block out all the details. Then we can come back to refine it for fine details if we want to, right? It doesn't have to be that deep.
No, agreed. Yeah, I like the earliest sort of like thing I used to do was like base coat, wash, tidy up, and then just focus on the face. That was my early learning from
weapons. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And even then, sometimes like the weapons would just be a wash and maybe like a dry brush. But yeah, because it's really interesting. Like I've done so many units and stuff, and I had a one-to-one in person. Actually, I had one of my patrons come down to do a one-to-one, guy called Andy, and he has a lot of shaky hands, so he struggles. So I showed him like ways to get like an Imperial Guard army painted quite quickly. So it was like loads of overbrushing. So you like do the lowest texture, it's fatigues, spray it like he sprayed them grey. I was like overbrush it with Andrew Dust, lighter with a bit of bone, and then all you're going to do then is pick out the armor, and then we're going to pick out all the webbing, and all you need to do is focus on the face. And I was like, and there's another trick. This is the biggest trick: is focus on the face, because most people look at faces because that's just the human element of you like to look at actual faces. It's like doing like a stripe on a helmet and then chipping it with a sponge.
Yeah.
And then people think you've actually done more effort than you actually have. And they're like, oh, that looks like, it's like, my 2 clones you were just talking about a minute ago. Most of that is base coated and washed. There's no highlighting, there's no blending. It's just like
what pulled me to it was that extra little bit of the stripes coming across
Yeah,
the armor.
yeah,
I'm like, oh, that
yeah,
looks great.
yeah. Sponge chipping on the armor with like a sponge. It's like there's no sort of like, I've been out there ages like building up layers of chipping and stuff. It's sometimes the marking and the general sort of how it all works together and works in conjunction with each other. And it's just all base coats and washes can throw people off, and they go, "Oh, that's a lot of effort." It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah, I always find it as well. Like, you can do really simple stuff that is still impressive. Like, I don't know. I personally advocate for like painting doesn't necessarily need to be complicated for it to look really cool. I'm like, people can make amazing looking armies with a fairly simple method. And I don't know. I don't like to ever sort of like gatekeep the painting side of the hobby, being like, oh yeah, like, you can't do that because you're not good enough. I'm like, everyone is like good enough to make a really cool looking army, I feel,
Yeah, and I think if anyone's brave enough to pick up a paintbrush and start putting color on a model, all the power to them. And I think anyone that gets, because we've had it with comments on some of our videos, and people are like, you're not very good at painting, you should get off the internet. I'm just like, why are you even saying that?
Man, come on.
And also I've come to the conclusion that a lot of, and there's something Pat observed as well, which is you get to it like as a beginner, you don't know anything, so it's overwhelming. You're like, oh my god, you're amazing. It's like you know, mum. My mum will look at my painting and go, "That's so good,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, "It's not, but thank you.
Thanks, mom.
It's okay." But then
Yeah.
people get to a certain sort of like level of like they now understand what base coating is and shade, and they've done a few models, they've got that under the belt. That you kind of like, oh, I know what I'm doing now, and I know, and I've watched these videos and this, that, and the other. Most of us, I'm saying a good proportion of us, will be sort of quite clued in and go, yeah, I've still got a lot to learn. But some people just think they know it all now.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed that so many times with like some colleagues in the past, some people that used to come into the stores. And I think they're the ones that tend to do a lot of the commenting because they now know stuff, but they're still not at that level, but they feel that they have a place to now tell you. It's like supporters for football.
Yeah.
Football supporters all seem to be experts at playing football. Yet why are you not on the pitch?
Exactly. Yeah.
You're not on
Yeah.
the pitch because you're not very good, but you know about it. So you can comment on it and go, oh, that was a rubbish kick. You're like, well, get on there and show them how it's done then.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's the same analogy. Really. Like there's a lot of folks out there that are at a certain level that they think that they can make those comments, but they still don't know enough to be clued into it. But I just love it. I mean, I've been called a hobby tourist in the last couple of months as well, which is really
What
funny.
does that even mean?
I think it's a new sort of like trendy phase that
Okay.
you're not, and I don't agree with it at all. But people like will just go up to people and say you're a hobby tourist, and you're just here for a bit of fun, and then you're going to go off and do something else. It's just like it's just like a little pastime that you're going to get bored of and wander off, and it's usually aimed at like the females in the hobby, which is quite annoying.
Kind of stuff you see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I actually disagree. I think the hobby, any kind of tourist, is more world wise because they've seen more of the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I mean, like,
you know.
I just speaking from my own experience on that front, like I've learned just again from the painting kind of side of it, like I've learned painting techniques by like picking up AOS models, Lord of the Rings models, or just like random 3D prints that I would have never gotten from 40k because I'm like, oh cool, I've never painted this texture before.
Yeah.
How do I do it? You know, I picked up a bunch of the Cities of Sigmar guys in the last couple of weeks, and I'm just like,
so good.
actually, I've just realized I don't know really how to paint cloth like that well, you know. So I think you're totally right. Like bouncing around between different projects, different sort of scenes and stuff, it exposes you to such a wider variety of kind of media, which then inspires you to go on and do really cool things for your own projects.
Yeah, I mean, none of your viewers can see this, but I've got a suit of armor in the background. As soon as I started doing reenacting, I got a better appreciation for armor and the undersuit and the leather work. So then it changed my way I painted that kind of stuff and the textures that they're made of. And it was at that point I discovered leather isn't just one color. I used to do leather as like dark brown with a shade on it. And then I went to like a reenactors market and there's red leather, there's green leather, there's blue leather, there's like really light yellowy looking leather. I'm just like, oh, my leather doesn't need to be brown anymore. And then you look at the weapon hafts of like bills and spears, and a lot of them are painted a color. They're like painted red or they're painted blue. And I'm like, I always just thought they're brown.
What do you mean everyone doesn't wrap it everything in brown leather?
Exactly, yeah. So I was just like, so I learned so much from just doing a bit of reenacting.
But that's so
great.
cool, you know, like that's something you would have never gotten if you didn't go and do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and seeing it and wearing it and understand the weight of it and stuff like that was like really interesting and give you a better appreciation for stuff. But yeah, hobby tourists say what they like.
What does it mean?
What does it even mean?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, look, I think that about rounds out the part 1 segment. So we'll take a quick little break and we'll come back, everyone, for part 2 that's going to be coming up in a sec. Welcome back, everyone, to All Around the World Leaders. I'm joined once again by Chris Peach, better known to some people as Peachy. We're into part 2 of the show. So, Chris, again, going back to the like non-hobby related question that I asked at the very start, this is a different one in this side of things. Ooh. So, tell me, what is your favorite food in the entire world that you've ever had?
Oh, so
another loaded question.
I like food. I do like eating food, and I've had a similar question, like, you know, what is your favorite meal? And I'm gonna have to go with that. And if I was like on sort of death row and someone said to me, you've got one meal to eat before you die, it's really boring. And I know people are like, that's such a boring answer. I don't care because I like it. I'm a big fan of every form of egg. So I love eggs, right? So I like scrambled eggs, I like fried eggs, I like poached eggs. I like egg sandwiches. I like boiled eggs. So I'd have at least one of every egg type, maybe more. Big fan of chips and
Hmm.
mushrooms. So that would be my
Unusual
meal.
combination.
I know, I know. I usually fried mushrooms as well with a little bit of oil. I quite like mushroom
Hmm.
mushroom soup, or just mushrooms that are picked that have been sliced for like a salad and whatever. But again, maybe a selection of mushrooms as well. Um, but yeah, I think that that would be my meal. But if it was like, no, you can't have that, that's too boring. I think I would go for I'd love a curry and I love a
Yeah.
karachi. Uh, so
Respectable.
maybe, yeah, it's hard because
Yeah.
I like food for many different reasons. Pork pies, they're great. I like them. It's really hard to answer. Pork pies with chips, egg, and mushrooms. There we
Few
are.
mushrooms scattered about.
Such an English response,
Easy,
maybe.
easy.
With
Not too bad.
Karachi on the top as well, somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, lash it
Yeah.
on. Amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, one thing that I kind of mentioned at the start, and before we kind of came on air, but obviously in the last like little while, I've seen you've been exploring a lot of other different types of game systems, right? You know,
Mm.
there's like Star Wars Legion and a
Yep.
whole bunch of other stuff. In your time, kind of like playing other games that aren't Warhammer, because I just love talking about things that aren't necessarily just Warhammer. It's so much fun. But was there anything that like jumped out as like that was incredible, like either to paint, to play, or just like the environment that you got kind of sucked into?
Oh, there's a few, I'm afraid.
Oh, work away. I'm
Oh,
here.
cool, fantastic.
I'm here
I,
for
th
it.
I think initially it all started off one sort of probably around about Christmas time. Myself and Duncan, we both wanted to get into Napoleonics, and I got him a box of French for Christmas. And he was over the moon. It was like he still goes on about it. Like, it's it's my favorite Christmas present I've ever had, because it was like I had physical toy soldiers at Christmas that I sat and built, and I had sat and painted one, and it was just
Could
really
you want
nice.
anything more, really, at that point?
Exactly.
It's like
And
harkening back to when you get Lego as a kid, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that was a lot of nostalgia for him, because I used to get like art like Revel or Airfix figures for Christmas sometimes, and we both agreed that we're going to do a sharp game. And we used Lord of the Rings as a gaming system, and we initially got really into that. Just it was more the process of just I was painting up for sharp, but Duncan went down the route of I'm painting up French from history. I was
Okay.
like I'm painting up random redcoats from a TV show that's probably wrong. And then we made a game.
Excellent.
It was all mad.
Yeah.
I learned so much in this time. So at the time, I mean, I've always liked like the Waterloo and Peninsula era stuff, especially seeing Sharp, but I didn't know enough about it. I painted up these guys and didn't really know what I was doing. And I got a box on the Perrys, and it's got instructions at the back. And then I got some more box from a company called Victrix, and they had these things called flank companies and like center companies. And what does that even mean?
Oh, that
Then I
sounds
got
so. I'm already like sucked in.
yeah, I'm just like, what does this all mean? And then
Yeah.
I kind of got an Osprey book. I tell you, I had one because my dad had one years ago, and it described what a flank company was. And the box set was like 52 figures, so I thought it would be a whole, you'd use them all. But actually, it pans out that in a British battalion, you'd have like 10 companies. There'll be 8 normal center ones, and then there'll be 2 flank ones, grenadiers and light infantry. Grenadiers usually go and protect the banner, and then the light infantry would run in front and form like a skirmish screen. They used to have like green plumes and stuff like that, a bit like Sharp's rifles, where they have like the little bugle, but it'll just be a green plume and stuff. And I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, this is interesting. So that okay, I'm getting to know a bit more. Oh, and depending on what cuffs and um, cuffs and collar. There we are, words. Or facings, as an know. So I learned about this. I was
Yeah.
like, what's a facing? And then from there, I just got really into it. And then Duncan got really into the French. So we started building up an army. We had enough stuff to play a game called Black Powder. And that was using the old War Master rules. I don't know if anyone's played War Master. And it was an incredible game. The first few games, we were hooked. And we still try and play it now. And the best way to describe Black Powder, certainly from like an Napoleonic game, is you bring your army. There's no real points. I mean, you can do tournaments, but you basically just agree like we're going to play 3 brigades, and in a brigade you might have 2 regiments of line and a cannon or some cavalry or something else. So we brought like a selection of these. And what you do is you bring on a brigade and you describe what you're going to do. You can only do up to 3 moves in a turn for your unit. So it'd be like, right, okay, we're in march column, so I'm going to form into line. That's 1 move. So I've formed into line. That's 1 move. And they're going to advance up to the hill to where the fence line is. That advance takes 2 moves. So my guys have now formed into line, and they're now moving up the hill, and they made it to the fence. Great. I then do similar sort of like gestures and like posh sounding commands to the rest of my
Yeah, of
brigades and this,
course.
that, and the
Yeah.
other. And sometimes they might over the, I might do enough of a command check that they could actually do more, but I've only said to do this, so they end up stopping where I've told them, so I can't do any more. And that I really like that. And there's been times I'm going, right, I want you to form line and then no march in march column, then form line and then fire at the enemy. And then they fail and can only do one command, which is march forward, and they're still in line, and they're in like march column, which is not a great place to be in when there's enemies around. And it's just hilarious when you like make these commands and you fluff on the dice roll. And then we're adding a bit of history in there. We're both getting quite sucked into like the history side of it. I'm buying books left and right. Then
it's
I move to
hole at that point, right?
Absolutely. And then you get the cavalry, and then depending on which nation you've got, there's so many different color schemes and like satellite nations that might have like joined, and like the British had the same. I mean, I went down the route of I'm doing Peninsula, so I've got Spanish, I've got Portuguese, I've got the Legion. So there's loads of things, and I just got really into it, and that's always been like a firm favorite of mine. And then recently,
that sounds absolutely incredible. Like that kind of era is like has me hooked. Like one of my D&D universes is like set in that time, and I'm just like,
oh, amazing.
Listening to all that, I'm just like, oh, I just love that kind of like the Black Powder era, where it's like you've got all, like the muskets, but you still got the swords and stuff going on. Oh, it's just I remember when it was like one of the very first Warhammer tournaments I went to. They had this side area of the hall where I think it might have even been some variant of this game being played anyway, but during one of the breaks I was just like walking over and just standing by two gents who were playing the game, and one of them was doing that where he was like, yes, I'm going to come around here and I'm going to flank your unit, and his opponent just like picked up the whole thing, and I was like, no dice, no like complicated mechanics for wounding and hitting or anything like that. I was just like, I can't get my head around this. I'm far too young to understand. But it just looks so cool, and now looking back on it, I'm like, that just looks like so much fun to play.
I mean, it's time invested, and like, being an army painter, it was like my skill set to paint lots of stuff, again following the, like I said earlier, about like base coating the cloth and stuff, and then just highlighting the face. But when you start adding like banners and stuff, that really, because you're painting for the unit, so you're doing the spectacle of the unit, so the banners are like the last finishing touch, and they're always good fun to do. But I had so much fun doing that, and you can just learn a lot from just like being around other people, and like like me and Duncan like shooting off each other, trying different things and stuff. But it was a fun time, and a good game system, a lot of excitement from doing that. But recently I've discovered something called Silver Bayonet, which is by Osprey Games, and it's so good because it's like Napoleonic meets horror, and you literally need. It's so good.
I think I saw that you posted like a regiment of these guys. So I think I saw this.
You have a unit. It's called a Silver Bayonet unit, and there's you can. It suggests the 6 main factions. There's more. So the 6 main factions like British, French. Then you got Prussians, Austrians, which are both German, Russians, and French. But there's so many more between that you can just pick one of those nations and go, oh, you know what? I want to do Portuguese, so I'll just use the British list, or I want to do, I don't know, Württembergers, I'll use the French list or whatever. So you can do what you want, but you literally have only up to 8 figures. So you have to have an officer, and he has I think it's like points. He has 100 points he can spend on his unit, his Silver Bayonet unit.
Okay. So it's kind of like Kill Team Warcry.
It's a bit,
sort of?
It's like Kill Team meets Warcry, So you get like an infantryman. If it's British, you could be like, I'm going to get an infantryman, or a grenadier, or a Highlander, or a light infantryman. Light cavalryman. And if you get a light cavalryman, you have to do a bit like Lord of the Rings, a horse version as well as a foot version, because they might dismount. You don't have to. You could just do them on foot if you wanted to, but I like to do both because I'm mad. And then you get like weird stuff like the occultist or the supernatural investigator, and if you depending like
Austrians, me like hooked so hard already.
and people might be listening to this going, Napoleonic's not my thing, but it's picked the Napoleon era because there's so much scope for color and conversions and kit bashes and choices. But because the weapons are muskets and swords, you could literally do any era from like, I don't know, the American War of Independence, probably even before like the English Civil War, all the way up to probably World War One, because you're just using muskets, which could be rifles, and hand weapons. So you could do whatever era you want to. But there's a really good disclaimer at the front going, don't worry if you don't know nothing about the Napoleonic Wars. Make it up as you go along. If you want your guys to have French cuirassier uniforms, but the British do it because they might have killed him in battle and gone, I'm going to wear that and fight a vampire.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I remember, there's not that many documented cases of vampires running around during
Well,
the
this is
year.
it, and if there is, if people have got a problem with you using the wrong uniform, they and you don't have a problem with fighting vampires, okay,
Yeah, it's like, all right.
but so I've gone down a rabbit hole with this. So I've done what I call my sort of like initial starting force, which is like a British force. So I've got a Highlander, I've got a rifleman officer, I've got a rifleman infantry guy, I've got like a Coldstream Guard, a King's German Legion guy, I've got a dragoon, I've got an artillery. So there's like an artillerist. He can't bring a cannon with him, but he knows about explosives.
He's like
so
a
I've
sapper, basically.
yeah,
right?
pretty much. Yeah. So he knows how to blow stuff up. So I've got like the real pretentious toff who's the officer who's like had his commission bought by daddy. He's got all the best gear, and then you just got these really grizzled veterans around him. And I've recently just done. I call them the Templars. So I thought Knights Templar. Yeah, I've been at the time I was watching Nightfall, which is about it's got Mark Hamill and it's about like
right.
Templar.
Oh yeah, I remember that show.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it, actually. It's a shame they never
Yeah.
did anymore.
Yeah,
So I was like, you know what? What was if the Templars were still around, but they'd gone into the Napoleonic era? Would they still have like the Templar shroud, like their robes?
like the
But would they be
yeah.
using muskets? So I've done like a whole bunch where I've just kit bash using some of the Perry medieval stuff. And it's a bit like Turnip 28. If you don't know what Turnip 28 is,
I'm very aware.
Oh. So
love
I basically just
2020.
went Turnip 28 in Napoleonic era, and then now sort of Teutonic Knights or like Knights Templar. So they have like
Sick.
full plate armor. They've got like a tabard, which has like whichever Templar house you want to do, and muskets. But some of them have like broadswords, some of them don't. Some of them have like shields and a sword. And I just thought
This is
that'll
like
be
so
fun.
up my street. Like that description alone, I'm just like, oh man, that's brilliant. Like,
I was looking at Crooked Dice. I love Crooked Dice. This is another game system. They do something called 7TV. Don't know if you ever heard of
I have
this.
not heard of this one now.
Oh, right. Oh, so much scope for this game as well. So Crooked Dice, Carl Perriton, I think, owns it. And it is a game. So it's the way it's pitched is quite interesting. People are like, that's not my cup of tea, but it's a really good game system. There's a really good skirmish game system that you can use anything against anything. So very model agnostic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how it's pitched is if you're doing a TV show. So you're buying a cast. So what you do is you have a main star. You might have two main stars and you might have some co-stars. And the main star might be like the action hero. So you're going to do Arnold Schwarzenegger from Commando as your action hero. And your sort of cast could be like, it could be all the Arnie's from all the different movies.
Yeah, all the other ones, right?
Yeah. So that could be the co-stars. And then you have extras, which are just like, so if you did Doctor Who, it could be Doctor Who as your main star, a couple of his companions as the co-stars, and then like Unit, which are like the army guys for like your extras.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of G.I. Joe and Cobra, so I did a bunch of G.I. Joe guys, and then like green shirts did like Cobra Commander, Baroness, Shadow Storm. I was about to say Shadow Snake. That's mixing two ninjas together there. And then just did a load of Cobra Troopers. I've based Warband on V. I've just done so many warbands. Duncan did like he's a big fan of Final Fantasy, so he did the Shinra Corporation.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
He's done Captain Scarlet. My mate Steve has done all sorts of random warbands as well. And the rule system's quite fun. It's quite a simple mechanic, and I think they've tweaked it recently with like they've done loads of different sorts of versions of 17. There's like fantasy, a dystopian, sort of Mad Max style.
Right. Yeah. So,
but yeah,
I love those model agnostic games though, because it's just like, well, what do you want to do?
Yeah,
it's just like,
exactly.
do something fun, and break out from the mold of like someone being like, this is what you have, this is what you have to do. It's like, no, like come up with something fun.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah,
and they're, on their site they have so many different things that you can buy, and if you're into like certain TV shows and stuff, there's Austin Powers. They do Austin Powers, for crying out loud. So if you want to do Austin Powers, that's there, and there's even fembots with machine gun jubblies.
Brilliant.
But I know it's like, of course
you're right, they do have it all.
But on there, and I guess it's for like the horror version that he's done. He's got like a supernatural game, which kind of ties in quite nicely with the Silver Bayonet thing. But there was a bunch of like Romanian henchmen, and I was looking for some sort of baddies to go with my vampires, and they've got like the Brides of Vampire. I think they're kind of based off the Van Helsing Hugh Jackman version.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah.
And they have these guys in like Russian Cossack outfits with like flintlock pistols. Again, it's flintlock pistol works fine for Napoleonics. So I've
Piece
been able
that
to get
I'm deeply looking after for at the minute, just trying to find flintlock pistols for my D&D campaign. I'm like, there's so few bits that have like good flintlock pistols.
yes,
It's so hard to find them.
I mean, the Hero Forge is great because they have a selection of things, but sometimes it's not quite always the thing you need.
No, yeah, it's not always not quite there, but yeah. Well, go on anyway. Tell me more about these vampires.
Oh yeah, so the vampire. Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, I just wanted to do a bunch of baddies for the Silver Bayonet, so I've got like a whole swathe of ideas. This is my problem, right? So I mentioned to Pat like, oh, this is a good game because I got a copy from Pete the War Game. I was like, oh, you might like this. And I was like, oh, we ought to play this. And I got really excited. I started frothing at Pat. And I was like, I've done these and I've done that. And you can do this. And he's like, oh, it's my gateway drug into like Napoleonics. I was like, yeah, you can do what you want. And then I just went down a rabbit hole and wrote about 17 scenarios. That's a storyline. And I'm like, this is what we're going to do on the channel. It's like, I don't think we've got time. I was like, no, we're not going to do a 17. I just wrote 17 because I got excited.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's always the way. It's like, I know I had Tanya the War Mistress on the podcast like a couple of months ago, and she was telling me about a game called Mythos, which is kind of like a sort of a skirmish game. Yeah, it's based on like the Lovecraftian kind of mythos era, but tweaked a lot. And lo and behold, here I am a couple of months later with multiple war bands, a bunch of 3D printed miniatures that I can never use, and a whole bunch of other stuff where I'm like, yep, cool, this is fun now. But yeah, it's I get your vibe. Falling into that rabbit hole it's hard to get out of it.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been given lots of suggestions from doing videos like, oh, you need to get into Moonscape. No, is it Moonscape? Moonstone, maybe.
Yeah, the name is familiar, but I can't say I know really much about it.
And another one, I think it's RuneScape and Moonstone, and like Frostgrave. I've got a load of Frostgrave stuff. Yeah. So I do need to get on that. But what I've been doing, like for Silver Bayonet, and anyone that's listened to this now, because I've got loads of Napoleonics and Perry miniatures, so I can just grab a box, get a sprue, clip some stuff out, ready to do like a random figure for this regiment to go in my warband or whatever. But actually, if you go onto eBay, you can there's so many sites that just sell single sprues. So I got a single sprue of everything, just because I can. And now I have choices. So many choices.
Something we all love, but
choice. We love it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Brilliant. Absolutely love that.
Sorry, I get too excited.
No, that was great. Like that was so up my street. I am now potentially going to look at picking up Silver Bayonet after this, but that is another project. In any case, so kind of getting back to like the sort of painting aspect of miniatures, in your kind of illustrious career of painting miniatures, is there anything that like jumps out in terms of, you know, a favorite sort of model or army that you've painted, or you know, something that you have painted yourself and been like, that is like, you know, my peak. I've painted something brilliant here now.
Oh yeah, I think from a single miniature, I don't think I've got peaks as such. I think I've got things I really like for different reasons, but I mean, I've put effort into some models. I've done like some stuff I sat with Heavy Metal and did some paint stuff, you know, sat and painted with them, and they taught me things. And I've got a couple of models I really like, but I don't. And I even gave one of those away to a friend because it was just like, oh, you like these things, you have that. So I don't think I had that much emotional attachment to it, but I was proud of what I did. I think most of my things tend to be like the spectacle, the you know, like when I do like a regiment, and if there was a project, I'll go back to that Empire one. That there was so much that happened in that time, and I really enjoyed the process. And just looking at like the uniform and heraldry guide and going, I'm going to make this regiment from this book and this regiment from this book or whatever. So that's definitely one thing. Doing the Marathi video, so when I got into the Warhammer TV scene, I think that was like me getting to flex, not my painting muscles as such, but just like the hacks you can do. Like at the time, I would always, and this is something I used to like try and help like newer painters get their head around. Like if you can find a way to get that effect with minimal paints, try it. So like Marathi has like this grey skin and it's like shaded red, and it's probably been like painted grey maybe and then blended with reds, or maybe it started off as red and highlighted with greys. And I was like, sod that, I'm just going to spray it grey and get some red, thin it down and just wipe my thumb away, and then that's kind of like shaded it and blended it. And
brilliant.
Annoyingly, the test model worked fine. When I did the video, it was a bit hit and miss. I had to redo some bits and this, that and the other, but it was just nice flexing that side of my skill set and then getting going, actually, no, this is okay. Because I remember when I joined, Duncan was like, oh, we do a lot of, and this is no disrespect to Duncan because he's very good at painting, but he likes to base coat, shade, layer, highlight, and I like to spray a majority color, wash it, dry brush it, pick out some details. And he was always like worried that I'd get like bullied for like doing like really like simple paint jobs. I was like, no, it's hacks. There's a difference between hacks and simple paint jobs. And
they
I
can
think
also be both, in my opinion.
Yeah,
like a simple thing is a hack a lot of the
yeah.
time.
Oh
too,
yeah, no, agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we say, keep it simple and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that like helped him visualize like what I would do from that side of things as well. So so that was a good sort of. And then Bellicor later on, just dry brushing most of Bellicor, and then
Beautiful
taking
model
off.
to dry brush.
I really enjoyed painting that model for Warhammer TV. It was just so much fun, and just getting to be like in control. I know, not that I wasn't in control before, but I think there was too much sort of decision by
Oversight.
committee.
Yeah,
And
I
like
get you.
just
You get a little bit more creative, like kind of
yeah.
license then with something like Bellicor, I guess.
Yeah. So like the Empire Army, I was trusted to do a job because my manager was like, I've hired you to do this. I know you can do this. Go off and make that look cool. And then White Dwarf were like, yeah, we need this. Can you do that? I'm like, yeah, of course I can do that. And then because I had all that, I could do anything.
Empire.
Yeah. And that was the most rewarding thing because I was trusted to do that. And then there was a time when, there was a lot of people going, oh, I'm not sure. That's not quite the Citadel way and this, that, and the other. And, that can get quite frustrating, but I understand why, because it's a marketing department. You want to market the products and make sure,
especially when there's like quite a specific, I think, like box art sort of style. I'm happy to see that it's kind of like, I don't know, it's starting to move away. I guess a little bit. Like I'm seeing a lot more like weathering coming into like GW painting now. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Or like non-metallic metal and stuff like that. Where I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay, but like definitely back in the day, it was a little bit more like this is what's in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's great, for like the people who want that and stuff. But I think there's a few people maybe who kind of want a little bit something different as well, or something a bit more accessible too, because like we can't all paint to the heavy metal standard.
No. I mean, there used to be a rule that we would try and keep it to box art where we could, but would find like we didn't do lots. We'd use a color that looked similar to it, not the same tone. That was something that I think some of the newer painters, when before I left, the new presenters, did struggle with a bit. I was like, you're not trying to make that exact color on the box art. Look at the range of paints that we sell, because it's easy to use one pot of paint without any mixing, because anyone can then if they're making an army or whatever, they can then just get that pot of paint and then redo it later on. If it's like 6 months later they want to add to that army,
you don't have to explain blending or mixing.
Exactly.
Well, which is like, it's a difficult concept. I feel like if you don't have a sort of an art kind of brain that sort of thinks the way where it's like, okay, I'll put these two colors together, it will make this color and hopefully not brown.
but even then, I've been painting for years, and sometimes if I'd mixed a color and then like 3 weeks later come back to doing another regiment, I won't get the same color again.
Oh yeah,
no matter how hard I try, there'll always be like a tonal difference, or I'd like just use too much of a blue instead of a red or whatever. So that was interesting, like going just use a color that's close to it. The only time where I didn't do box art was the Achillean Leviathan, the big floating turtle, because I looked at the box art, I was like, nope.
That looks like paint.
I was like, I'm going to do the army painting one and show people how to paint that, because that's far easier and accessible.
I remember that Idonut range came out. I was kind of like, these miniatures look amazing, but no one is replicating this. Let's be real.
I mean, it's nice to see, like, and I think Heavy Metal used to get a lot of stick from some of the IP leads, which was like, it's a fantasy setting. Stop painting horses brown. Stop painting, and this is not like, you must stop painting horses brown. Please continue painting horses brown. It was I think the way it was worded was to go, you can do what you want because it's a fantasy setting. If you want to do a horse that's almost a red as opposed to like a chestnut, you can do that. But so because it was
green horses running all around Age of Sigmar.
And this is the thing. It's like, I think because some people would be very sort of like persuasive, like, no, you must move away from like traditional natural colors, look at what you can you can be more fantastical about it, that as opposed to people going, oh, I understand what you're trying to say, and like read between the lines. It was like verbatim, like, I must now paint all my horses red, or I must now paint all my birds with flamboyant colors and stuff like that. So it got and I guess I don't know, because it's all fantasy, it's all underwater creatures not in the sea. You could go mad and doing it and do what you want, but then I could see how people used to find it quite hard
Daunting.
and daunting. Good word,
It's
daunting.
that guy, the guy who has the big wave coming up behind him as the cape. That's the one where
Yes,
I'm like,
yeah,
I mean, I'm pretty comfortable saying I'm pretty good at painting, but if you gave me that miniature, I would just be like, nope, it's gonna
yeah,
be blood or it's gonna be nothing at all.
yeah. How can I
Exactly.
cut all this detail off without having
Yeah,
to paint
like, just
it?
chop this out here. Somehow he's flying through the air. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool
tricky.
though. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I suppose before we close this one out, one last question to hit you with, and it's quite a simple one, and I think we kind of touched on it a lot, but and you probably get it a lot. But what do you think is the most important piece of advice you could give to someone who's sort of like, I want to get better at painting, just in general?
Uh, I I think so. Something recent I chatted to a friend, Dave Andrews, friend of the channel, but also still works at workshop. He has a friend who paints, and his friend is not as good as him. And I have friends that paint, and they're technically not as good as me because I'm lucky. I've been doing it for 8 hours a day for so many years and
It
decades.
helps, yeah.
It does help
It
a
does.
lot. And I think if you're happy with what you've done and you try something to improve the next time, and then you're happy with that, that's the best advice I can give. Is be if you're happy with what you've done, doesn't matter what anyone else says, you're happy with it, and that's the key thing about painting is being proud of the things that you've done and then learning something new and trying something new. And if it doesn't work out, don't worry about it because it's not important. It's painting toy soldiers. I mean, the great thing about paint is it's certainly nowadays, we used to use thinners on, and you can't do that on plastic, whereas now you have like bio strip and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So you can always strip it and start again, but you can always paint over things. Um, that's like the general sort of like, anyone that's getting into
I
painting
mean,
and they're
that's wonderful
struggling.
though. Like I resonate with that so much. I'm like, just be happy with what you've done. Don't
Yeah,
compare it to other
yeah,
people. You don't need to. We all paint different stuff. Like there's people out there winning golden demons, and they're
yeah.
like looking
Oh
at
yeah.
other people being like,
Don't
I'm not good
compare.
enough.
Yeah,
Just don't do it.
yeah,
It's like I always say to people when they kind of come to me about it, I'm like, if you have painted a miniature, you're already better at mini painting than like 90% of the people in the world because they just haven't been able to do it.
yes, yeah,
It's
absolutely.
like
Yeah,
it's already really cool. Just be happy for yourself
yeah.
because you've done something creative, and that's awesome. And
No,
then yeah, just
totally.
try new stuff. Don't get locked into a system. It's kind of the way I always feel about it. Just
Yeah,
experiment around with new ideas.
no, agreed. I mean, and that's a really good way of putting that. Actually, probably far better than I did.
I don't think
But
so. I'm just
I don't know.
piggybacking off what you said.
But there's another thing, like for those that want to test the skills a bit more. And maybe it's not their first time picking up a brush, and it's something I come across so much, even like when I was in the painting team, when I was managing the painting team, and even now when I do my one-to-ones, is do a test model. I know it sounds mad, and what I'm saying by test model is not like just a throwaway model you're not going to do anything with, but if you've got a squad of like, I don't know, 20 guardsmen, paint one and get the colors blocked in, and you don't have to highlight it, you don't have to like shade it, just like, do these colors work well together? I'm going to shade it now, and now I'm going to highlight it. Okay, I'm happy with this. That is the most important thing you can do for any kind of project or army. If you're starting an army, is that test model, because it does a couple of things. It saves you a lot of time because I've done this. I've made this mistake. I've started a unit and not done a test model, and halfway through the unit, I've gone, "Oh, these colors aren't going to work together," and now I have to redo
And
so
make a
much
terrible
stuff
mistake.
on
Yeah.
like 20 figures.
Mhm.
Whereas you do it on one, you're getting the colors, going, "Oh, I've done the stripes red on this yellow armor. Should I do it blue or red? I'll try blue. I'll paint blue. No, I prefer red. I'll go back and do red." There we are. That looks cool. But it also informs the process as well, like the order in which you're doing the paints. And this was the thing where I was telling the guy that I did the one-to-one in person when he came to the studio. It was like, he was sitting painting. I was talking. I was like, "Are you writing these down?" He was like, "I am." I was like, "Is this going to inform your order?" He's like, "Yes," because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray him grey, and then I'm going to heavily overbrush with this. But before, because normally I'd do the armor, and then I'd do the cloth. But actually, doing the cloth is the larger texture. There's more of it. I can be messy because the armor's higher up. I was like,
Mhm.
"Yes, you're learning," and then stuff like that, like like the guns you can do at the end because they're like right out. You don't have to worry about doing like the eagle on the gun at the start. You can do the eagle on the gun at the end. And it's just one of those processes that I always do when I paint. I test the model. I then look at all the colors because I jot the colors down and go, right, so I've got grey clothing and blue armor. It'll be weird to spray it black, so I'll spray it grey. So that's the cloth done. I'll just shade that and dry brush it. Then I'll do the armor because that's the next texture. Then I'll pick out all the straps and belts and whatever, and the boots and the gun, because then that's the next texture. And this is all in base coat stage, then actually if I get any black on the blue, I can tidy up the blue again. Then I'll do all the metallics, so the silvers and the golds, because that's now higher up on the helmet and higher up on the gun. And then I'll do the face, and then it's the base. And then that's my order then. And I've now not only worked out the colors all work together, but I've now got an efficiency for the entire unit that I'm going to do as well. So it speeds up the process. And that might be that you paint 2 or 3 a night, but you've still got that efficiency in place.
Yeah, I mean, like, you get that test though as well to, like, as you said, it informs so much about the process, which, you know, like I know the biggest thing for me was when I started my demons. I started with like a juggernaut first or something, and I got it wrong. I was just like, oh, I've now messed up a juggernaut. I could have started with a bloodletter. You know? And then I would have known all this stuff. And yeah, I just think it's a really good piece of advice. I mean, it's all been really solid advice. Like, I think everything you've said there is just like super informative. I've said it all myself as well a bunch of times, and yeah, I really think that if anyone's listening wanting to kind of pick up on like how to get better, how to get into it, you know, and get off the ground, I think those are the main things that you really need to jump in on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Fantastic. So I suppose before we close it out, is there, you know, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you and how they can support you and all the good stuff, the plugs.
Yes, I hate doing plugs because I'm rubbish at it.
It's
but
awful.
yes, we have our YouTube channel, which is the Painting Phase. So do go along there and check out our videos. It's a bit of a mixed bag actually at the moment because we do paint guides and chat shows. So there's a variety of stuff. It might end up being that we do like 2 different channels, one for chats, one for painting. But at the moment, we're happy with what we're doing. Even some battle reports in there. One at the moment. There's more to come. So we all have our own Instagram accounts. I've got Peachy Tips. So, you know, if you ever want to ask questions or got any thoughts, we also have a Patreon as well, which is the Painting Phase. It's really interesting. Like, you know, I didn't realize that people like with Patreon, and this is such a new thing for me. That there's so many benefits to the patron. Like, you know, you could get like feedback depending on which tier you pick or one-to-one sessions. People pay for those tiers but don't make use of it because they just want to support you. And I've always found that really sort of like,
it's always the same for us. I'm like, you know, we're giving you stuff here. It's like,
They're
like, no, we just want you to be happy. I'm like,
it just
I want
gives you
to be happy.
faith in humanity. And I'm always like, I feel bad because I mean, I've got like at least 100 people that are on like the £15 tier, which is once a month, send in a photo of your work and I'll give you feedback on it. And I usually spend about like half an hour typing up some feedback. And some of it's like, you know, constructive. Some of it's like, you know, work on this. That's really cool. Don't change that. That's you're nailing that. But, you know, and some like fundamentals of painting. Like literally 5 or 6 people a month just send stuff. There's 100. There's 100 on that tier, and I'm like, what? Why are you using it?
I guess it's like it's a pretty solid like stamp of approval though for you know people wanting to support you without necessarily getting a direct benefit, right? It's,
but yeah, so if you want to support us,
as you said,
absolutely, but so I mean, we have all sorts of random stuff going off, but yeah, we do some Twitch streaming from time to time on Wednesdays and Thursdays, but yeah, most of it is just go to the YouTube channel. It's got all the links there anyway. So
yeah, I'll definitely endorse it as well. Like, I mean, when I started watching it around this summer, and I basically just binge watched everything in because I was just like, this content is phenomenal. So for anyone listening who hasn't already checked it out, take from me, you are missing out if you're not already watching it, because the talk shows in particular I have thoroughly enjoyed. They're really, really good. But listen, dude, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and I've really enjoyed this episode. I hope everyone listening has as well. So until the next one, folks, this has been All Around the World Eaters. You've been listening to The Red Path, and I've been Dara. So we'll catch you for the next one. Stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.